Hi, this is Simon Upsdell. I hope you're all safe and well, and welcome to another tutorial for Apple Motion. And today we're going to be taking a look at creating this effect. Now, depending on how your brain works, you're going to be seeing this as something different to maybe what I'm seeing it as. In my head, what I'm seeing is a kind of liquid metal android kind of character. But even if you don't see it that way, I think this is quite an interesting look, and I'm sure you can adapt it in some interesting ways. It doesn't have to be the head of a character, it can be a whole body, and it'll work the same way. So first of all, let's check out our project setup. We've got 1920 1080, we've got 25 frames a second, and we want a duration of 7 seconds. So then let's import some elements. So I'm going to put a link to all of these 4 items in the comments so you can follow along. So we've got a black and white matte. We've got our character comped over the background. We've got a reflection map. And then we've got this alien landscape background. So the first thing we want to do is we want to select Danny Comped, come to Properties, and I want to change its speed to 50% and its frame blending to optical flow. And I want to do the exact same thing with the matte. So 50% speed, frame blending, optical flow. Then I want to take Danny Comped, right click, add image mask, use Danny Matte as the source, and switch the source channel to luminance. So now he's cut out, and we can reinstate our alien sky background, and there he is sitting over the top of it. So if you're wondering how these elements were made, the matte element and the comped character on the background, there's a tutorial that I've created that explains how it was done that I'll link to in the comments. So essentially for this, you need a character that you can key off the background, as we've done here. So the next thing we want to do is we want to take that reflection layer and drag it out to the top there to make a new group. So what this is it's the sky from our alien sky background, but without the mountains and the planet and so on. So it's a much simpler version, because what we want to be doing is reflecting an imaginary background behind our heads rather than the actual sky that we're using for the background of the shot, if that makes any sense. So if we use the background itself rather than this special reflection map, he would look much more like the Invisible Man or something. And it's in using this reflection map that we can create the illusion that he is made out of some kind of liquid metal or something like that. So the first thing we're going to do is add an image mask to this group. So right click, add image mask. And again, we're going to use Danny Matte. Again, switch to luminance. So then I want to make a clone of this reflection layer. So right click, make clone layer. And then I want to duplicate the clone. So right click, duplicate. So the lower clone, I want to set its blend mode to overlay. And the upper one, I want to set its blend mode to darken. So the lower clone, I'm going to come to Filters, Distortion, and I'm going to add Polar. Then I'm just going to move it over on X, and the value I think I want is about 360. And I might just move it down a little bit on Y as well, like that. So what have we got there? Around -100. And I'm going to copy the Polar onto the top clone. So that's Alt or Option drag to drag it onto there. And I'm going to set that X value for the Polar to 360 and 0 out the Y, I think, in this case. And then I'm going to add a levels to both of these. So color levels, copy that onto the top one. So this lower levels, I want to bring down this white value quite a bit to around here. And the upper one, I want to go even further, all the way down to around there. So then we want to add some filters to this master group here. So first of all, I'm going to come to Distortion Underwater. Let's set the speed to 0, and let's have a refraction value of 200. So that's done a nice job of deforming our reflection map, but the main work is yet to be done. So I'm going to come down to this Danny Compt layer. So that's our character keyed out. And I'm going to hold down the Auto Option key and drag him right up to the top here to make a new group. And I'm going to call that group Displace. I'm going to turn it off. So I'm going to come back to this group here, and let's call this Android. I don't know what this character is, but I'm going to go for Android. And we're going to add another filter. And this is the key one. So it's Distortion Bump Map. And we're going to use that Displace group as the source. So drag that into the source well there. I want a direction of 23 and an amount of 4. And you can see how that's completely changed things. We now have an almost 3D-like version of our character. And I want to be very clear that what we're seeing here is not the source image itself. We're just seeing the displacement that the source image provides to our reflection map. So it's a really different effect, and it does give this interesting 3D look to it. We can improve this a little bit by coming to the Danny Compt layer and adding a color levels. And again, I just want to bring in the white just a little bit, just punch it up. You can see how that's changing things, giving us a little bit more intense result. So somewhere around there I think is good. So let's close up Displace. Let's come back to our Android group and add another filter, color hue saturation, because I just want to reduce some of this color. It's a little bit too intense. So what we're going to do is set the saturation to -0.3. And it's just helping to bed him into the scene a little bit more. And I want to add another levels just above this, just to give us a little bit more out of those whites. Just push those through a little bit more, like so. Now, if we turn off our base group here, you can see we've got some holes up here in our character. Well, so what I'm going to do to fix that is to actually duplicate this Android group. So right-click, duplicate. Let's call this Android top, and let's open it up. So I think I'm just again going to turn off that base layer so we can see what I'm doing here. And what I'm going to do, I think, is just to change this bump map angle. And I'm going to go for 10. And then I'm going to increase the amount all the way up to 7. And what I need to do here, which I omitted to do with the other one as well, and we'll come back and do that, is to turn on repeat edges. And you can see that's filling it out a bit more. Come down to this one here, come down to the bump map, and again repeat edges. And we're almost there, I think. Just a little bit of probably tweaking on the direction there. That low one here, I've set that to 28. And I think we've filled in those holes, and that's looking good. Another thing we could do, of course, if we wanted to get fancy, is we could change the blend mode of this upper layer to get a different result. Really, there's no kind of absolute answer to doing this. And in actual fact, I quite like lighten there. I think it's good. I don't know what it's going to look like when we've turned on the base, but let's have a look at that. Do we prefer lighten or do we prefer normal? I think I'm going to go with lighten. Quite like it. A little bit more shiny. Now, as I've been editing this video, I spotted that I've made a rather silly mistake with one of these clone layers. And it's the top clone layer, the one I've set to darken. And stupidly, I told you to enter a value of positive 360 for that, which is the same as the other clone layer. And actually, I meant negative 360. So negative 360 on here, and on the other one as well, we want to do the same thing. Negative 360, because the whole point of this was to get that nice dark shading there on the nose, for example, and when we turn around, it just looks a lot better if we have those numbers. So the next task is to set up a matte that's going to wipe off this metallic outer shell and reveal the Android underneath. So we're going to, first of all, close up those two Android groups, make a new group just above them and pop them both in there, call it Android Master. And then we're going to make a new group right at the top, Object New Group. We're going to come to Add Object, Generators, and we're going to look for Clouds. We're going to set the speed to 0. we're going to open up the gradient, click on the black tab there, set its interpolation to constant, and then you'll notice that if I adjust the white value, we get this growing mask, and that's what we're going to be using for our animation. So let's bring it halfway like that, and then let's select our Android master. Let's right-click, add image mask. Let's use that group with the clouds in it as the source and switch to luminance. And you can see how that's chopping into the overlaid texture and revealing his face underneath. But we need to do one other thing with these clouds, and that's to displace them so the texture looks much more like it's being molded onto his face. So we will again use distortion bump map. And we're going to take Danny Compt down there and use that as the source. I'm going to set the direction to 25 in this case and the amount to 4. And you'll see how well that now is fitting around his face. So what we need to do is animate these clouds to create the reveal. So I'm going to come to 4 seconds on the timeline. I'm going to select that white tab there, set its location to 100% and keyframe it. I'm going to come forward to 6 seconds and select it again and set that location down to 0. And now that's giving us this wipe. It is, of course, going the wrong way. So what we need to do with the image mask there is to invert it. And now that's working like that. Now, I think what we need to do is convey the idea that the skin grows over the top of the metal. So to do that, let's have a look at let's get a little bit closer, come back a few frames to here maybe. Let's select the Android group and come over to its drop shadow and turn that on. Let's have an opacity of 90, blur of 0, distance of 3, and that angle I'm going to make 135. And I think with that angle, it looks as though the skin is on top of the metal. Just to my mind, that's what my brain tells me. So I think that's going to work quite well. And we just need to fade off the Android master group at around this point here. So I'm going to come to 524. I'm going to keyframe its opacity, set that down to 0, step back a few frames, set it back up to 100. And now because we've added this drop shadow, I think you can see we've got a bit of an edge to him, and that's not good. So we've got to add another group right at the top here above Android Master, drop him into there. And we need to take a copy of our master head image mask and alt drag it onto this group. And you can see how that has cleaned that up. Now, I feel that this edge is a little bit too crunchy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the clouds here, add a filters blur, Gaussian blur, and also a filters color levels. I'm going to set the blur amount to something like 12. Let's just zoom in a bit so we can see. If we just bring the black and white close together like that, you can see we've tidied up the edge. If I turn those both off, made it less crunchy. You can increase the smoothness by increasing the blur amount to taste. And just so we're totally convinced that he's an android, there's one other little trick that I want to try, and that's come down to my base layer here, and I'm going to duplicate that Danny Compt layer. I'm going to make a new group and put him into that, and I'm going to call this eye glitch. I'm going to come to around 610, I think, on the timeline, hit I on the keyboard, step forward 1, 2, 3, 4 frames, and hit O on the keyboard. And I know that just runs for those few frames there. Just going to zoom into this eye here, going to select the Bezier mask tool, and I'm just going to draw a little mask for his eyeball, like so. And then what I'm going to do is, to that eye glitch, I'm going to add stylize bad TV. We need to turn off waviness and roll. And then let's increase the static That's probably pretty good. Maybe increase the saturation like that. It's quite nice. So we can just get something like that. Looks pretty good. Maybe just feather in our mask by a pixel. So go for something like that. So now if we zoom out, you'll see he just has that tiny little blink and you miss it effect right at the end there. So there you go. Thanks very much indeed for watching. I hope to see you again soon, and stay safe.